Hi, I'm Neely, and this is my wife, Chelle Clements. We're here to talk about how we spent our COVID-19 spring vacation or extreme telecommuting security. I'm an senior IT professional at Lawrence Livermore Lab. I've been there over 30 years. Also co-host of the Paul Security Weekly podcast, and the ISSA podcast that is just starting. My wife, Chelle, has been associated with computer science and cybersecurity for roughly 25 years.
No, longer than that, but it's okay.
And she retired about 7.5 years ago, and very much involved still with cyber and veterans causes and other wonderful things.
Oh my God, everybody is now working from home. And who would have thought that 8 months later we would still be doing it? And it looks like the second wave is beginning, which will make it even more of a challenge. With this beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were all put into a whole new dynamic. Remote working, most of the people in the population had not been doing that. It's put the people, it has put the systems, technology, and just about everything else on a crash course to get going.
The challenges of updating policy, technology, and take care of a workforce heretofore not working at home, jobs we thought could never be done from home are being done from home. Platforms that weren't necessarily ready to scale had to scale processes. Unexpected, difficult to graph, clear communication about what was permitted where. All these things were done on the fly as we were running down the freeway at breakneck speed.
Along with everybody else.
Yeah, and that kept us all jumping.
And there were, there's a lot of complications that came from people having to use their home offices, which maybe were not allowed in the company policy, but it had to be reevaluated for this situation. Even simple things like, do your people need headsets? What other things that they may have had at their office that now they have to have? How do you get that to them? And the employees that had never worked from home before many of them needed a lot of hand-holding the first couple of weeks getting started on this.
And how? So we're going to cover issues related to moving to 100% workforce almost overnight. In some cases, it was overnight. Solutions discovered to cover the challenges, plans to prevent recurrence of issues we found along the way, and ways we can use those solutions in the future, as well as restart impact, essential services, and resuming functions that cannot operate remotely.
Next.
So in the issues of working to 100% workforce, the main things we run into is that not everybody has a laptop. Not everybody has a home office. Not everybody,
Next. Not everybody had a good enough internet connection for what was going on, and not everybody knew how to use the technology. So not everybody had been issued a laptop while they were in the workplace. A lot of the people had desktop systems that they were using. So now it's, what are they going to use? Are they using something that they already have at home? If not, how are you going to get them a system? How are they going to get it set up? If you couldn't find a laptop, could they take their desktop home? How do you go about replacing damaged systems? Local or unmanaged accounts. Most companies have a lockdown access.
Right. Not everybody gets to be admin on the machine. And in fact, normally we manage accounts from the institution. We don't have many local accounts. They're part of AD. The users aren't able to turn all the knobs. For the home laptop, you might have to have them with admin privileges. And maybe you make sure you turn on always on for user access control. At the prompt in Windows, it says that you can click OK. In fact, the only way it hasn't got a publish bypass is in the always mode. And are you provisioning without any touch, zero touch being a thing these days? All of these cause challenges in terms of creating a secure workspace at the home. Additionally, if you do allow that desktop to come home, is it suitable for a home, or is it dependent on perimeter and other controls in your environment? Is that part of its security posture? Now, we know not everybody has a home office.
And your couch or kitchen counter or easy chair is not exactly designed to be part of your home office. You don't have the privacy there. You don't have the ergonomics there. Your breaks are done a lot differently. And sometimes it's not an effective workspace. We know a lot of people right now that one's at the kitchen table, one's at the counter, one's taken over the living room, and somebody else is doing school from their bedroom.
Generally speaking, also people aren't necessarily on as registered breaks, nor do they have limits on their employment time. I mean, because it's right in the house, it's easy to commute to work 24 hours a day. We had to set limits, or I was guilty of being too much in the workspace. Another thing we've run into is that not everybody has sufficient internet connection. We saw this everywhere, not just our neighborhood, but it was reinforced by our neighbors. Not all forms have a guaranteed service level. Often home internet is an as available basis. Or the availability, they haven't signed up for 24/7 availability, which is more appropriate for business. How about a shared connection? As everybody ramps up on the local provider, whether it's cable, DSL, passenger pigeon, fiber, there are congestion points that are getting congested. Also have folks try using a MiFi as a primary, which is an interesting scenario because one, MiFis often have data caps, and so they slow down. And two, cellular service isn't always as sexy as it sounds on the glossy where you happen to be using your Wi-Fi. In our particular area, there is a general neighborhood provision, and we're talking around several square miles, of putting up additional cell towers. So you need local repeaters and the like to be effective online. And the more rural you get, the more of this you see. And then on top of all that, a business quality internet service costs generally at least double what a home internet service costs.
You also have the issue of not everyone knows how to use the technology. When they're sitting in their office and they have a problem, somebody from IT support can come in and show them what needs to be done. When they're at home, okay, now they've got to find somebody from IT who can walk them through. And there's the security issue when you're doing this also. If you're using your personal system, it may not have the same security that your work system had. Some of the facts from all of this: WebEx has seen a 451% increase in use. Zoom, 354%, and MS Teams, 775% increase in use. A lot of bandwidth.
Yes.
And scheduling video teleconferencing, you've also got to now show people how to get it started, how to get in there. Internet audio versus PSTN. What are your company rules about this stuff? There are some that are really tied down. Zoom bombing. We have had many instances that we have seen of Zoom bombing, and the people that were conducting the meeting had to learn how to deal with it and how to ramp up their security. Configuring the services, enterprise services, providing guidelines to support secure meetings, and service vulnerabilities. How do you keep all your clients and all your people updated on what they need to be doing?
In case you're paying attention, just a couple of days ago, we had WebEx come up with 3 pretty good-sized vulnerabilities, which allowed for Zoom bombing-like behavior. And they patched their servers, but you got to patch the client as well.
Client needs to know about it.
Yep. Then there's the issue of solutions that are being discovered, and we need to continuously reassess their viabilities. We got to look at what equipment's available. We got to look at gaps while equipment's being ordered, depending on the solution. Remote desktops, online collaboration effectiveness, and how do we secure personal equipment at home? Personal equipment is part of the equation, whether we like it or not. So we have to make sure it's appropriate for its function.
So need to assess what equipment is available. There weren't enough laptops in reserve probably at any company when all of this happened. And you can say there was a supply chain fail, but this was right after Christmas. How many people got new systems at Christmas time? It was going to be difficult to get new ones. And especially a lot of those laptops are made in another country and things weren't able to be shipped. So, how do you build up that reserve? And do you have the peripherals that you'll need for them? The monitors, the headsets, keyboards, mice. How deployable is what you have? When you literally almost overnight go from they were in their office, now they're at home, how are you going to get the equipment to them? Are they going to go back to work somehow or another to a relatively safe area to pick things up, or somebody going to be taking it to them? Disaster recovery plans. I bet your disaster recovery plan never, ever thought about something like this happening.
Yeah, this would be a good lesson learned to incorporate them. In fact, I recommend reviewing them with a light to what we learned this last season.
8 months.
8 months. Because we've learned a lot that doesn't show up at a tabletop exercise.
So where are you going to find suppliers? You're going to have to do some backroom deals to get to it. And is all this new equipment and backups in your budget?
Yeah. And by the way, while the equipment is being delivered to fulfill the gap, what are you going to do? Are you going to allow personal devices? And if you're going to allow personal devices, what sort of data do you allow processing on it? Because you're not going to be able, sort of a DLP problem. How about using virtual desktops? I mean, beyond just RDP, maybe VDI, or maybe virtual workstations in the cloud. What level of interaction is required with those virtual desktops? Are you forwarding peripherals or cameras or whatever? And what about the use of personal peripherals? We didn't just have a lack of laptops. We probably had a lack of headphones and cameras and or other things we're using. And of course, as Shelley mentioned, the whole deployment challenge just keeps going, including configuration before delivering user. You can't just have it drop shipped to their house necessarily. You need to make sure it's appropriate for corporate use. So when it comes to remote desktops, like I'm saying, we got to look beyond the RDP and terminal server. We need things that'll scale better and can provision quickly. The cloud model where you can pretty much create a baseline and automatically pop out a system for a user is wonderful. But you have to decide, is this persistent? If I log into it today, do I get it in again tomorrow, or do I get a brand new one that's blank? And do I get to customize it? I mean, we can set up, OneDrive or Google Drive and others for files to be synchronized between the environment. What about applications and configuration of those? We don't want to have the user lose half a day getting it set up every day. Do you expose these directly? I mean, we've learned again and again that you don't expose RDP to the internet or other types of terminal services. They need some sort of VPN in front of them to protect them. And like I said, how long does it take to get these things spun up at the beginning of the workday? Incredibly important to work out.
So unfortunately, you need to be continuously assessing this online collaboration and what's working. Are your solutions scalable? Are you fully licensed for almost every person in your entire workforce to be trying this solution? Do you need to split the traffic in your VPN? Are the features of your solution sufficient for 100% workforce? And do they like it? I know that where I used to be, different divisions had different preferences on what they're doing. And if you're the person at the very top who's having to make this decision, there are going to be some other high-powered people just below that are going to argue about what it is that you're doing. How quickly can you provision and push out the new services? How are you migrating workers when nobody's on site? Where is your IT support? Who is going to be helping out with this? Are your people working remotely too? How's that going to be looked at? Suitability. Think about Zoom back last March and what you could do, and look at what Zoom's doing now. It's pretty impressive. And you can also look at some of the free services that are out there. But you got to remember who is accessing your data and how secure are the services. And then shadow IT, which is your specialty.
Yeah. So how about users standing up their own service? You can go get a Discord channel for free or a free Slack channel, but do you want business conducted there? Is that a DLP problem? There are hosted options. For example, Mattermost is a Slack-like service that you can host on your own infrastructure, but that requires your own infrastructure, and you can't just click and whip out the corporate card. So things have to be kept in check. Communication has to be made, and when they're ready to pop out their corporate card, that's an indication you have a problem that needs to be addressed. You can't ignore it. It needs to be a solution identified, and timeliness is important because the users are going to, if you're the problem the users are going to have to solve, they will solve you. So I would mention personal equipment at home being used because it was a great stopgap. But what we had to figure out is what to do to secure it. We had to come up with a minimum security posture, and you want to test that before you allow it to connect to the network. Things like, is it a secure enough OS? Is it patched? Is it running endpoint protection? Is it whatever you think the minimum is? And if it's not, what do? Do you simply deny the VPN connection and pop up a you don't meet the standards? Or do you quarantine it somewhere where all they can do is reach a SUS server or some other update service? Sometimes you could contract with your endpoint protection service to provide it for your employees as a license. Then you could provide a portal so somebody could install that, because there's some users that really don't want to pay for insert brand here endpoint protection on their own systems. They think whatever it comes with is fine. Is your VPN relevant or reliable enough to handle this work, or have you configured it only to handle company peripherals? And what about the personal system that's a multi-user system? You can't assume your employee is the only one with a log on their own system. Odds are their family members all have access to it. And are you willing to accept that risk, or you need to do some stuff to mitigate it?
So when you start talking about these plans to prevent recurrence, you need to look at what your lessons were learned and apply them. And this is not quite daily anymore, weekly, monthly. Don't forget to fix any shortcuts that somebody may have developed here along the line. And don't go overboard either when you're trying to. Moderation. Moderation in all things.
So when it comes to, yes, indeed, the help desk. The help desk was probably engineered to support your on-site corporate devices, maybe a little bit of remote support tools, probably not personal systems. But the thing about it is when they're in the equation, you have to come up with not only what level of support you want to provide, but you might have to have the users have a single-click support client they can install, and the gateway to your support environment may have to move outside your perimeter so it's reachable. Also, when it comes to help, they're not going to be able to pick up the phone and dial, and dial for help on the corporate extension. They need to know how you can be reached, whether it's through your service ticket or your phone or whatever. And you have to keep in mind that they might not be able to reach the system to enter a support ticket. They might only be able to email or phone, and that has to work. And this is part of the reason when it's challenging. I mean, if these were easy problems, we wouldn't have been talking about them.
Still, after 8 months. So, improved training. Think about, did we actually train users on the services that would be needing during a disaster recovery kind of event? Did we train people on how to stop meetings and participate securely? I'm thinking more coursework has to be designed for people to take these things online.
Yep.
And in the future. We're going to need to raise the bar on some of this training. And I know that's a horrible word to somebody. They get really tired of training and training and training. But this may be around for a while. So security officers, are your employees practicing good habits from home? And how are you checking? And even if you can't see your employees in the office, and this is for the normal managers, they still need to be reminded that there are people out there trying to hack into their systems. The systems at home must have consistent security practices. You have to be keeping things patched, your endpoint protection enabled and current. And it's almost going back to where things were in the 90s when everybody was their own admin. We've gotten very used to having a central IT that was doing a lot of this management. Okay, some people are going to have to learn how to take care of themselves again. And if they've got a system at home, they probably have been doing some of it. You're just going to be ramping up their security, which is good for them in the long run.
And part of the training is not just how to use how to connect up to Zoom or WebEx. It's how to connect up when there's a problem because there's saturation or network troubles or other. So there's a lot more diagnostics and failover needed because things aren't always working every time right now. And it's not the end user. It's the world. It's the world.
And the training, and I hate to keep using this word, but we do. Training needs to be constant. There have been studies that you will run a phishing exercise and do training on phishing, and it rolls off their back within a couple of months. So at the very least, every 6 months, I had talked to a friend of mine a couple of years ago about phishing training. And he said, I've been taking it ever since I've been at this company for the last 5 years. And it's just now starting to sink in. Yeah. And this is an intelligent guy.
So another thing about working from home, there is now a greater acceptance of working from home, including the management team. In many cases, historically, they were in the office. They weren't working from home. And they had management walking around, and they don't anymore. They've got to reach out, or the employee's got to reach out to them to make sure that they still know they're alive. we used to restrict non-exempt workers, that's your hourly employees, because of the rigor around hourly labor laws. Now we've learned how to trust them a bit, and they, have to behave, follow the regulated breaks and all that. The other thing is that previously we didn't necessarily see equal treatment between on-prem and off-prem workers. That's even more of a thing now, not just in the future as we get a change in the mix of workers, but also those that had to come into the office at some personal risk versus those that didn't or wish to stay home. You have to be careful to not make that be a thing. And also work we had previously not allowed at the house, we're now doing at home, which may or may not be a good thing to continue.
As long as you get your hours where they're supposed to be, you're safe from me.
Okay, dokie, that's a good thing.
So increased capacity of your services. Is everybody that's working remotely signed up for a VPN? And the VPN solution that your company has is providing, can it deal with the expected capacity of 7,000, 8,000, whatever people that are now working from home? And your company, internet service provider, and what people may have at home may not, how do you nicely put that, play well in the sandbox together.
Yeah, we ran into routing issues at the junction points between ISPs and our work ISP that our engineers had to go find, and it wasn't an issue it was an issue at scale. And that's where we had to deal with it. And there were other things like when you got your VPN, you might want to, at your VPN concentrator, split services off. So that maybe you don't run the WebEx video or Zoom video through the concentrator. You run this call setup and teardown to save some bandwidth. Or when we discovered that while our VPN would in fact handle our full user load, the bandwidth per user went down and it was unusable. So we had to augment our services. These are things we've learned on the fly, and we actually had thought these were cool in the COOP plan. We said, oh yeah, everybody can telecommute. We also learned that not everybody had VPN accounts, even though it sort of looked like it. That wasn't the case. We had to learn how to do that quickly.
So changing policies and risk acceptance to support work from home. Corporate America was pretty much a show up at the office, and that changed very, very quickly. And it's about personal peripheral use, alternate services, remote work types that were permitted, vendor support of your corporate solutions. Again, can they take everybody if you've got 7,000 workers working at home, and the services that were used? And it's not all black and white when it's time to update your policies and your risk acceptance. And you need to be flexible for a while longer. At the very least, you need to be...
you need to accommodate reality. I mean, it's real easy to say that only corporate peripherals can be plugged into corporate devices, and that gives you your supply chain security. But, the users at home, they've got a laptop with a 12-inch screen and they got a 40-inch monitor in front of them. Why not connect it? What's the risk? Look at it and consider your postures. That brings us around to restart impacts as we think up.
There will be a restart.
There will be a restart. Absolutely, there will be a restart. And when they're transitioning back into the workspace, what's that going to look like? How do we keep the expectations current? What services worked off-site that were not used on-site before that should be used and embraced on-site? Can computers and services that were off-site for this extended period be used internally? Can you safely hook them up to your internal network? As well as how will employees that have adjust back to the normal workspace? I mean, they'll have to wear pants again. It's crazy talk, I know.
So now you're talking about, and it will happen, you're working from home, employees will be transitioning back. Their work habits have changed. Maybe their hours have changed when they're taking their breaks, when they're taking their lunch. Maybe they weren't wearing pants, they were in sweats. And they got to get back into their jeans. And if they've gotten the COVID-19, putting the pants back on is going to be hard. But, and the new normal. What will the new normal be after you've had 7,000 people working totally independently by themselves? It's going to be an adjustment to being in a hallway with a bunch of other people and the conversations, and how do we get back to the way that we used to do group meetings?
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to be on Zoom and looking at our cell phones while we're on this meeting trying to talk to what's going on. There's also going to be, home equipment. Are you going to be allowing any of that back in, or what's going to happen with it? But do you trust your employees? How are you going to handle that? Just to think about it. Do you trust that they were doing what they normally did while they were there, and that they'll be doing the same when they come back? That they'll be doing their work as securely throughout all of this?
It's going to be an interesting challenge.
It will be.
And then how do we keep our expectations aligned? Particularly, not everybody will return on site at the same time. Partly, there will be people that don't want to go back on site yet, and you're not going to be able to force them. Other people may be out sick, or other situations may be occurring, or you have an increased, people have moved to a full-time telecommuter that used to be in the office down the hall. So you have to make sure you remember to include them. Now that we're no longer all remote, we've got a mixture. We have to remember to create a remote meeting of ETC, even though, what if 80% of the team is actually in the building? You still need to add that. The work hours now move from a little more casual work hours that we've had at home, although I recommend a consistent schedule when working from home, just as a telecommuting best practice.
And you wear pants every day.
Yeah, well, you've got to put yourself in a work mindset. But now that becomes more, because you have to mesh with the people that are on site, it's less flexible. And now we also have commuters again. So we have that, you're no longer commuting from the bedroom to the office, unless you're working in the bedroom, it gets even shorter. You've got to allow that multi-hour commute time that some people had again. It changes the dynamics.
And the stress from the commute.
Yes, and that adds stress again. A lot of people got a lot less stressed when they started telecommuting.
So what are the services that your corporation may be providing for offsite that may be good for onsite? Some of the collaboration services, meeting practices that have evolved in the last 8 months. Gather input. Seriously, talk to your people. What do they think has been really working well? What have they been using that has made their life easier? I remember at one point when you started being able to do a meeting from your office, which didn't last very long at the lab, if I remember right. It was great. You could be in your office doing it. You didn't have to worry about finding a bicycle and going all the way across campus to where the meeting was. You were just able to do it from your office. So maybe some of these solutions with the meeting practices and services will work, but talk to your people about what they want.
So remember, you're now going to have to include commute time between meetings, whereas before you could almost make them back to back because the bodies weren't moving. They were just connecting to a new meeting. And also, we got a lot of etiquette in this, the raising the hands, the muting when not talking. Maybe some of that should carry forward, or maybe not.
Who's got the baton?
You do.
Your turn.
So, thinking about these computers and services that are used off-site that can be used on-site. For services, have you authorized them through your firewall? Is your web application gateway blocking them, and that needs to be changed? Physical computers, what kind of security assessment do you want to do before you plug them back into your corporate network? Your network that's been largely pristine while you were gone. You don't want to introduce issues. As I said, we've got new services we've discovered. Are they appropriate for your network? Right. If you wouldn't allow connection to them before, what's the risk of doing it now? And has your enterprise perimeter and endpoint protection strategy changed? I know a lot of companies, they've revisited and looking at it a whole new way with it externally. And now how do you map that for continuing policy and continuing procedure?
So back into the physical world, employees that have been working from home, what will now adjust to being back in quote unquote normal offices again. Masks.
Yes. I could have brought a prop.
Are they going to have to wear masks in their office? Or if they have a closed door office, can they take it off when they're all by themselves in there and they only have to put it on when somebody comes in? What to sanitize? What not to sanitize? And how often? Restaurants have been cleaning down the tables and the chairs in between people. What are you going to be doing there? Your break rooms. Who's going to be cleaning the microwave? Who's going to be cleaning the dishes in the sink? Who's going to be washing off all of the flat surfaces and keeping it neat? Are you going to be hiring more custodial people?
Can you get custodial people?
The cafe, is your cafe going to be dine-in or take-out only? And again, you get back into cleaning the tables between people being there, the tables and the chairs. Single occupant restrooms, multi-occupant restrooms. What is going to be the level of sanitation that you're going to want to have? Again, are you going to be hiring a custodian for each building or each floor to keep going through and keeping this stuff going? And in a conference room, you're going to put a shield between people? Are you use it at a quarter or a third capacity? Nobody breathe. Proximity right now is a thing. And maybe it won't be in 8 months, but right now it is. And we know that some people are going in and out of the workspace. And we know there's got the mask rules and the sanitization.
So with your conference rooms, are they set up for remote participation? Do you have a sufficient monitor? I mean, at home, we had the monitor in front of us, and that was fine. But with a room full of people, you might need a big flat screen TV or other projector on the wall. You might need room systems to really get the most out of it, something you really didn't have as much need for when you had fewer remote participants. So as you're resuming essential functions which cannot work remotely. These could include classified or highly sensitive work, experiments that require local manipulation, or even people that are ineffective working from home.
So classified work, something I did for 30 years, and there was no way I could ever have done that at home. The security issues, the amount of data that you're trying to protect, that could be in transit or within the environment. When I was doing classified work, I actually had two systems, one for unclassified and one for classified. It's possible a type 1 encryptor could be supplied, but are you going to trust it? And there are so many regulations and laws for dealing with classified information. And if you're working on classified at home, your family most probably doesn't have that. Are you going to try and build a SOC within your house to be able to work at, its own secure little room, soundproof and...
Oh, way more than soundproof. It also becomes a vault with alarms.
Yeah.
And also, when you're resuming classified, you have a whole restart plan. You have to verify the space at work is still appropriate for classified. And for home, this just not as practical. We think about this because I actually had several offers to help about having real classified being done from home. We can get it, we can transmit it securely, but the environment is a fail.
Yeah.
So what about experiments? I mean, lab systems are generally isolated. You have manipulator arms, you have glove boxes, you have
showers,
you have eye wash stations, you have biohazard level, whatever protections. That it's for both physical and biological safety. And generally speaking, if you're doing these kinds of work, you've had a big impact to your mission because you were doing it for somebody. And in fact, a lot of places have restarted this work, but it's most definitely not homework. And some people talked about accessing those operational technology or SCADA systems remotely. They're not designed for general internet use, so you have to be very careful connecting them up, and it's better to keep the specialized equipment isolated.
And you can't blow stuff up remotely either.
No.
Not really.
No. Generally frowned upon. So there are people who are rather ineffective working from home.
Well, it's because they just can't do the job from home.
Squirrel.
A squirrel. ADOS, attention deficit. Oh, squirrel. People who are ineffective. I have now been working remotely for 7.5 years on the stuff that I do. And the first 6 months, I got things done, but I wasn't that good. I needed more interaction. I was used to being on a team. I was used to we would work off of each other. We would check each other's work, make sure that there weren't any mistakes that were being made and passed on. Sometimes it's difficult to focus when you're at home. It's real easy to get up and go grab a cup of coffee and, oh yeah, I'm going to throw a load of laundry in or whatever that. It's easy to get off task. Environmental challenges, especially right now. Your kids are screaming for you. If you still have kids at home, we had to call Blue Cross the other day. And the poor lady had barely started with us and her baby started crying and she was so apologetic. And we were like, don't worry about it. Take care of the kid. We're here. We're fine. And there are some people, not many, but there are some that are demanding that their employer provide the same environment in their house that they had in their office, as far as equipment and desk and chair and phone and accessibility to things, all the stuff that they had while they were in an office, they want to have it again. And that's not real. That is not real. Some people just don't want to work from home. They don't like it. They don't want it. And it gets frustrating.
It is. And so we don't want to force those that don't want to work at home to work at home. We need to be able to get them back in the workspace. And so here we are. We've been adapting at speeds. Hell, we're changing the tires, rolling down the freeway.
You've seen those videos.
It can be done, but it's really crazy. Our work environment has been redefined. We've had hands-on experience of an 8-month COOP event. It's awesome and scary at the same time.
Yes.
We've learned a lot, and we need to apply it where we can.
And so your challenge is, and I want to phrase this the right way, What does your corporation want or need? What can they live with? And how do you update your policies and your procedures to deal with this all, not now, but going forward? We have all discovered that this sort of thing can drop on us like that. And just a little bit of remembrance here. I was looking it up again this morning. The Spanish flu 102 years ago had 3 phases. It took over a year and a half for it to finally be gone. And the second phase, which started at about 8 months after the initial phase, was actually the worst. But we're not borrowing trouble here because we know medical technology is so much better now than it was then. But it's going to be happening.
And with that, we want to say thank you to all of you for watching and the questions you will be submitting. And thank you to the Security Weekly and CRA teams for giving us the opportunity to participate in this event.